All right. Good morning, everyone. It's a little bit after 9:30 here, so I'm going to go ahead and call to order the May 14th, 2026 meeting of the STP Project Selection Committee. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, please be sure to complete the sign-in sheet out in the hall before you leave. Any members of the audience that want to make public comments later on the agenda can fill out a comment card and hand that to any CMAP staff in the room. This meeting is being broadcast on Zoom and is being recorded. In order for those online to hear what's being said in the room, it's critical that we turn our microphones on and identify ourselves when making a motion or a second. For those participating via Zoom, please keep your microphone muted unless you're called upon to speak. With that, let's start today with self-introductions of the members here at the table. I'm Kama Dobbs, Chair of the committee representing CMAP, and to my left,
Jeff Shelkey, I'm chairman of the CMAC Council of Mayors, and I'm also the mayor of Batavia.
Grant Davis with CDOT.
John Paul Deepla, FHWA.
Mark Pitstick, RTA.
Mark Kukler, Council of Mayors and President of Village of LaGrange.
all right, and I know we have advisory member Tara Orban representing the counties is on her way, and advisory member Chad Riddle is participating via Zoom.
Good morning, all.
All right. With that, the next item on our agenda is agenda changes and announcements. Staff does not have any proposed changes or announcements, but do any members have anything to add to the agenda? All right, seeing none. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have before us the draft meeting minutes from our last meeting on March 26, 2026. Are there any questions or additions to those minutes?
I make a motion for their approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Mayor Shelkey, second by Mayor Kukler to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Moving on then to our active program management reports, we have John Hodsma to provide highlights today, starting with our shared fund status update and then followed by an update on the regional accounting.
Good morning, committee members. So there's been a couple authorizations for the shared fund since the March meeting. The first being for the 16th Street Improvements Project in Berwyn, which obligated $2.19 million. And the second for the Everett Road at Waukegan Road Intersection Improvements Project, which obligated $875,000 and brought total shared fund obligations to $7.9 million. The next slated project to obligate is the Little Salle Street Bridge, which that will be for $44 million. So that will use the remaining shared fund mark and begin to draw from redistribution. There are 9 other projects programmed for planned use of redistribution. That totals $46.5 million. 4 of those are for post-obligation cost increases or remainders, and the total for those 4 projects are $10.9 million. And then of those in planned use of redistribution, it's anticipated that the Sullivan Road project will be on the July letting, state letting, and that the Randall Road at Big Timber Road project and 131st Street project will be on the September state letting. It's anticipated they'll be on the September state letting. Other updates to note outside of 2026, the Lake Bluff Green Bay Road reconstruction project was moved from the November letting to the January letting. So that project was able to be reprogrammed down to 2027 with the available mark in 27. No other changes to note for 28 through 30. So moving to the contingency list, staff moved 2 projects from active to contingency for fiscal constraint. These 2 are the Joe Orr Road extension and the Grand Avenue Bridge over North Branch of the Chicago River. Both projects are making progress for 2027 authorizations and should be able to be reprogrammed at the start of federal fiscal year 2027 back into the active program. That concludes the shared fund report. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions for John on the current programs? All right. Hearing none.
We'll continue on then to the regional accounting. There's been more progress on regional obligations since March, moving from about $62 million to $82.7 million in obligations. No additional councils other than the 4 I mentioned at last meeting. The March meeting, which were Central, Northwest, Kane, Kendall, and McHenry, have begun drawing from the redistribution. And of those 4 councils that have been using redistribution, they've used a combined $25 million. Also noted at the March meeting, Will Council had $3,460,000 in obligation deadline extensions that were not used. And since they expired, they were transferred to the redistribution fund on April 1st. There's $95.1 million programmed using planned use of redistribution currently. And as always, staff will be closely monitoring those projects, especially for projects that are targeting the November letting, as pre-final plans are due tomorrow for those projects that will be continuing on to the November letting. We'll also have another round of quarterly status updates in June that will give us a little more insight and clarity on the status of these projects, and we'll adjust accordingly as we review those and report on those to you all at your July meeting. But with that, that concludes the regional accounting report. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Thanks, John. Are there any questions about regional accounting? I think it's just a comment from me. I'm happy to see that we are spending into that redistribution balance. So thanks. And I probably said this at the last meeting too. Thanks to those 4 councils for continuing to aggressively spend. So that puts us in a better position as a region within the state and as a state within the nation. So just spending down that balance is a good thing. So thank you to those councils. All right. Thank you, John. Next up, we have 2 methodology topics from staff. Those are resilience and safety. I think Doug's going to start us out with a little introduction here, and then we'll move into those topics.
Good morning, everyone. So as we approach October and our next call for projects, we're going to continue the discussion of potential updates to the selection methodology. So we will be building upon the safety discussion from the last meeting to provide some potential changes that we're recommending for safety. But first, we're going to do a little bit of discussion on the resilience planning factor. And so Kate Avasic is going to come and give some slight modifications to the scoring. It's not, it's building upon what we introduced the last time with resilience, but hopefully this is the time to share your concerns, but we're also looking to see when we're hitting a mark that you're comfortable with, like as far as changes are concerned. So as we build through the summer, eventually in August, we're going to be looking for approval on the changes. So if you have thoughts and ideas, even if they're not expressed today, please send them to myself or Kama so that we can make sure that we get them included as we try to build the program or the program document for the next call for projects. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
Good morning, everyone. As Doug said, my name is Kate Avasic, and I lead CMAP's Climate Resilience Program. And I'm excited to be back to this committee to talk about some proposed changes to the resilience planning factor. So next slide, please, and then you can go on to the next one. So the resilience planning factor, it was new last cycle. We created it to replace or really enhance the green infrastructure planning factor, really to help us consider the benefits of climate resilience in our funding decisions. And by understanding the need for resilience and the impact of the proposed improvements, we were then able to help prioritize projects that proactively address flood or heat impacts, not just today, but for the future. And in particular, the future meaning over the project's projected lifespan. We created this factor while we were about halfway done with our flagship resilience effort called the Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan, or TRIP. And so now that TRIP is complete, we want to make some modest updates, as Doug mentioned, to the factor to better integrate this work into our funding programs. Okay, so now I want to give a little bit of an overview of TRIP for those of you who may be a little less familiar. So next slide, please. TRIP is the region's first roadmap to advance resilience through planning and decision-making at CMAP, transportation agencies, and local governments across northeastern Illinois. TRIP was created with a diverse array of stakeholders across the transportation, stormwater, and emergency management sectors to inform its findings and its strategies. It focuses on our transportation system. It provides data and tools to help implementers and communities understand and anticipate future climate risks to our road, bridge, and transit assets. And it compiles priority projects that were identified by regional implementers and strategies to advance regional resilience, strengthen our transportation system, and increase safety and quality of life. So through TRIP, we conducted an assessment on the next slide to understand the transportation system's vulnerabilities to extreme weather and climate change. This was published in 2024, and the assessment identifies the region's top hazards, the types of assets most threatened by those hazards, and the areas where vulnerable assets are concentrated. Unsurprisingly, flooding was at the top of our list, impacting all assets and the system as a whole. But we also found that extreme heat is on the rise, and it poses the biggest impacts to all of us as transportation users, as well as outdoor workers who really keep the system running. Next slide. The assessment largely focused on flooding, the asset risk assessment, I should say, to identify those places and those assets in the region that are at high risk, either now or in the future. We also address transit assets to extreme heat, and so we have that information available. What you can see on the map here is the risk scores for road exposure to flooding, with the darker blue showing the higher risk and the lighter greens showing the lower risk. And the full assessment includes scores for the assets exposure to flooding or heat, the social vulnerability of the population surrounding that asset, and how critical that asset is to the overall risk score, the overall transportation system. And so this means that the overall risk score that we calculated for the vulnerability assessment can be used, or components of that score could be used depending on what you're looking for, and of course what we're considering for the shared fund methodology. This data can be directly used to help prioritize resilience investments both here at CMAP, as I'm speaking about today, but also through your own agencies, and staff are available and willing to work with you on how best to do that. Next slide, please. This is a list of all the data that we have available, both for download and viewing through our data viewer, and then also summarized in the report itself. The rain cloud here shows that we have risk scores for flooding, and then the thermometer indicates when we have data available for extreme heat. So lastly, I want to talk through some of the last components of TRIP that first focus on the resilience projects, and then secondly, the strategies to help reduce the climate risks that I just described. The plan contains the first ever regional resilience project list. This is made up of 64 projects identified from partner agencies, with over half of the projects already programmed in the Transportation Improvement Program. The projects feature improvements like bridge replacements, transit station upgrades, stormwater infrastructure upgrades, and detention basin or wetland construction for flood mitigation. And so by being identified in TRIP, these projects are more competitive for the National Protect grants and eligible for a reduced cost share. CMAP evaluated the project list to identify the 20 highest priority projects for the region to really help the agency focus and the region focus their support for potential project funding and coordination. But the truth of the matter is that all 64 projects are of high priority for implementers in the region. And importantly, the projects included on this project list, as I mentioned earlier, can receive benefits when applying for the next and final round of Protect funding once a NOFO is released. I should say, and many thanks to our partners at FHWA for working with us through that process. So lastly, another exciting aspect of the plan are the recommended strategies to help reduce the impact of flooding and extreme heat. We have 21 project resilience strategies that call out different structural or nature-based or green infrastructure interventions that can be incorporated into transportation projects, or sometimes are a standalone improvement that have a transportation benefit. These will help us educate implementers on different ways to build resilience into project design, and can also serve as a reference list for both CMAP as well as other implementers to use when evaluating whether a project incorporates a resilience improvement. Okay, so with that overview, I'm going to pivot now and talk about the planning factor current scoring and then our proposed recommendations. So how is the factor currently scored? Right now, the factor applies to all projects except bridge rehab and reconstruction, bus speed improvements, and corridor small area safety improvement projects. A maximum of 5 points is awarded, and then 1 point is reserved. Of the 5, 1 point is reserved for a resilience policy if the local jurisdiction in which the project is located has an adopted policy with the goal of increasing transportation resilience. So we cited a local green streets policy as one example of that. So then the remaining 4 points are awarded if the project includes elements that improve resilience to flooding, extreme heat, or other weather events. Projects that score the most points are those projects where they have higher flood or heat exposure scores from the TRIP vulnerability assessment, and they include resilience elements that help address those vulnerabilities. These eligible elements really vary based on the function of the resilience improvement, and we've seen various elements come in over the year. Some elements as currently scored are outright eligible, while others must exceed the established design standards to receive points. So for example, a project that includes that provides stormwater storage using gray infrastructure would need to provide additional capacity than what's currently required in order to be eligible, whereas a green infrastructure improvement is eligible outright. So we're recommending 2 changes this year that I wanted to talk through with you. And first, what we want to do is we recommend using TRIP's more expansive suite of 21 project strategies as an approved list of what constitutes a resilience element, while still allowing other elements to be considered on a case-by-case basis. So if there's something that is being proposed that's not on our list that might pertain to severe storms, it could be winter storms, then that's something that we can absolutely consider. But instead of requiring gray infrastructure elements to be designed above the standard, this change would make all of both the gray or structural improvements and the nature-based or green infrastructure improvements eligible outright. And then we would use the scoring process to really assess the impact of the proposed project. And then secondly, we recommend using TRIP's scoring methodology, which evaluates projects based on the system need and the project impact. And so in some ways this is similar, in some ways it's a little bit different, but I would say just minor changes here. So system need will still be determined based on the exposure score of TRIP vulnerability assessment. And importantly now, the web map, I think it was available late last round. It's available now, and so project sponsors right off the bat can reference that map in their application, and of course reach out to us if they have questions. Importantly, to demonstrate system need, if your need is not getting captured in the vulnerability assessment, that's okay. You can project sponsors will be able to demonstrate the need and write that in the application. However, the change here would be on the project impact. We would be assessing that based on the project's ability to mitigate the need and or to build additional resilience and provide additional co-benefits like water quality or air quality, for example. And so this will require us to add a couple more questions to the application, so that staff have enough information to be able to evaluate the impact of the proposed resilience elements. And really, we believe that this change will help ensure consistency between this effort and TRIP, and also lessen the effort required for those sponsors who did submit a project and have a project on TRIP's priority list. We would just go with the score that we've already gone through and calculated. And so one more change here to align the scoring with TRIP. We also recommend eliminating the resilience point, policy point. It didn't result in it was just 1 year, but it didn't result in a notable change. I feel like we were getting a lot of countywide stormwater management ordinances, which makes a lot of sense, but didn't quite fit the intent of the policy point. And we would rather put the 5 out of 5 points that you're getting, we'd rather put them towards the actual resilience elements that are included in the project. And I think that's all I have. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Kate. I think before we go into questions, we've always talked about at this committee kind of adapting our methodology as we do work like the TRIP assessment at CMAP. And so I appreciate that Kate was able to kind of take us through those first steps in our last cycle of adding the vulnerability information that was available at that time, and now taking it a step further that the full analysis has been completed to go ahead and tweak our criteria to match that full analysis. So thank you for that, Kate. And are there questions for Kate? How does the committee feel about this proposal? Go ahead, Grant.
I had a question about recommendation 1. So you had mentioned a project that for the gray infrastructure, if it was including it. So if it was including, let's say, storage for stormwater in the project, it would get points. Is that correct? So how does this? So if you have a project that's, let's say, in a rural area that it has the capacity and it's not cost prohibitive to provide storage, say through a detention or retention pond, would it then be giving additional points to that versus a project in a built up area where storage is, cost prohibitive most of the time?
Yeah, in that case, we're looking for I think the clear difference between this resilience planning factor and just meeting the design requirements of meeting your standard drainage. Like we acknowledge that just the simple, well, it's not simple, but the large act of upgrading our infrastructure does mean that the drainage that new asset is providing is better than what we have in the ground today, right? So I absolutely understand that point. But the intent of the resilience planning factor is trying to look at the future capacity needs. So not just, what's the precipitation that we're planning for, designing for today, but how can we look to the future and try to have more infrastructure be more adaptable to account for that? So yeah, in the case that you raise, if it is a project that is just a street reconstruction and it's really just upgrading the drainage per the requirements, that wouldn't you could score points by having that in a more vulnerable area, but you would have that project would have less of an impact than one that would be really expanding the capacity in a larger way.
I have a question that expands on what I think you're asking. So over the years, the rainfall bulletin that's used to design stormwater infrastructure has changed to incorporate higher intensity, longer duration storm events that do cause urban flooding. Right. And so when an agency goes, so like if you look at what's in the ground today, the standards that were used to design those stormwater systems are insufficient. Similar like in your house, right? The standards change. Now your pipes are all undersized, right? And I think we have a challenge as a region with that of our infrastructure. So I guess my concern on this item is the ambiguity around it, right? So if we're doing an urban or even, a rural cross-section, what are the criteria being used? Because in my mind, going above and beyond is using the updated bulletin. And I don't know anybody's here. I think it's 75. Like if they're using that, is that what gets you the points?
My understanding is that that is required now across the board. And so if we were to apply that as a meaningful resilience element, then everyone would be scoring almost essentially the same. So if, and this is something, I'm presenting this at a higher level because we do still need to work through the scoring and come back with that so that it is a little bit more tangible. And maybe what we could do is work through a rural versus more urban example to see
Well, they
how
still
that
have
would
the
shake
same
out.
criteria. So I think the challenge is like, is it understood by all the implementing agencies in CMAP, the enormous cost burden for just complying with that new standard? Because I think that's what you're talking about, Grant, when you're saying it's not cost feasible. Like upsizing the sewers adds an enormous cost to the projects. And so it not making it competitive for scoring, it makes it even more of a challenge. So not commenting for better or for worse, but just wanted to bring that to the floor for consideration by CMAP as you move forward, because it is significant.
Mhm.
It is not just a 12-inch changes to a 15-inch sewer.
Mhm.
Not at all.
Okay.
Tens of millions of dollars.
Can you say that louder?
Oh, it's
Yeah.
tens of millions of dollars to upsize that, as opposed to like if you have property that you can acquire for in a non-built up area to provide offsite storage, that's way cheaper
Mhm.
than in an urban area upsizing capacity.
Are you leaving these scope elements out of projects because of the cost? Like, would you be, I don't know, reconstructing in kind versus doing some kind of additional work? I mean, I think, as is always the goal with the planning factors here, it's to, those that are going above and beyond, it raises the cost. So because our improvement scores are related to cost, raising that cost, has an impact on the score as well. So yeah, I guess just thinking about what's the decision tree when you're deciding whether to include those elements or not, and if you've made that difficult decision to do it, shouldn't you be rewarded with points, I guess is.
Yeah, no, I think that we are including it in our reconstruction projects. I think it's because that's the new standard. I guess my point is we are meeting the resiliency requirements by following the new standard. Like it's baked into the cake when we do a reconstruction projects and it's followed.
Mhm.
And so what would be considered above and beyond then?
Well,
If
it
we're
could,
following the new standard for urban design.
yeah. So one example, I mean, it could be more gray infrastructure pipe capacity, as you mentioned. It could be adding some green infrastructure elements to that project. And so, one thought I have right off the bat is, we have the calculation of need and then impact. What I'm hearing from you is that, maybe we look at not scoring those, maybe they're not 50-50, maybe we give a little bit more to need, which would be, is the asset in a flood prone spot to begin with? Does it have an existing issue? And therefore, even just doing the project following today's standards would have a big benefit.
I think that makes sense given the limited funding coming to the region. And my other question that I had is you mentioned that there's an upcoming NOFO and we're at the end of the surface transportation bill. So this will probably be the last Protect NOFO, right? Okay,
Yes.
so how many Protect grants have been awarded to the region? I'm aware of the one that went to IDOT for the work along 290.
I believe that is it.
Yeah, so I mean, we have one Protect grant going to the region and we have just so many assets that are in need. If we focus the scoring on those infrastructure areas that are already have the demonstrated need and that are listed in the plan, then that to me seems like the appropriate way to score it.
Mhm. So just to clarify there, because I think you're speaking to how do we treat the projects that are on that list already?
Yeah, because this is dual
Mhm.
purpose, right? Like we created TRIP to address eligibility for protect funding.
Mhm.
And there isn't a lot of that going around, but then it also becomes a scoring element. So recognizing the infrastructure that is already very vulnerable and that has experienced flooding or those other elements,
Mhm.
the scoring would be reflective of that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. So I think we'll give more, I appreciate the comments and I definitely do understand the concern. And so we'll think about that in the context of, when we are scoring need and impact, what's the weight given to need versus impact? Mhm.
As a mayor of Batavia, I have kind of a totally different question. Sorry. As a mayor of Batavia, I have a kind of a totally different question and situation going here. We are in the process, we just last week took our city council on a tour of our new water treatment plant. And that plant was built by a phenomenal federal grant that we got when we had the Speaker of the House of the U.S. Congress had his office in our town. And when you have the Speaker of the House there, you become the target for everybody that doesn't like something in the world and they want to come and demonstrate and holler and scream and lay in the street and whatever. And it was a tremendous demand on our police department. I mean, it really was significant. So one day the speaker called me and asked me to come over to his office and he says, I'm really feeling bad about what happened in Batavia here. I'd like to do something for you. He says, what can you do? I said, well, I need a new bridge over the Fox River. That would be one. And secondly, I've got a water treatment plant that's pretty old, and we think that we have the opportunity, given kind of the situations that exist around us, that we could really start generating some clean water out of this. He says, I really like that idea. He says, so at the end of the day, we got from him a grant that generated multi millions of dollars to our community to build this new water treatment plant. Last week, we took the city council on a tour of it. And when the gentleman who we've hired to who now runs it's phenomenally good, he had all the aldermen standing there, and we get to the very point where all the water that we clean is all dumped into the Fox River. And the town to the south of us, Aurora, has announced that they're going to start taking water from the Fox River to drink because this water is clean enough. And largely, I think it's because Batavia cleans a lot of water before we dump it into the Fox River. So anyway, the guy says, I'll show you how clean this water really is. And he had a little faucet there that was hooked onto the discharge point. He puts a cup underneath it, fills the faucet, and then in front of all of us, he stands there and drinks this cup of water that's just come out of our sewer system. And so he says, nothing wrong. This is very, very clean. And so now I've been getting a lot of calls from other cities wanting to come over and see this and see how it was done. And we're certainly happy to host or show anybody around. But I think the bigger problem is going to be trying to come up with those federal monies that Speaker Hastert got for us when he was Speaker of the House and got all that money to put that facility into Batavia. But it really is a nice thing to have. And the other nice part about it was the Fox River in the last few months has been really upcharged by all the storm water and melting and everything else that went on to it. And we are told we take some of that water into our plant in a little bit of a fashion. And then we also are the home of the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, and they send their water over to us, and we clean that, and that's discharged in this system too. So we've got some I'm thinking maybe you ought to send a team out sometime and let us show you all this and explain it, because it's kind of a new angle to how water is going to be kind of recycled and reused in a very safe and clean manner.
Yeah.
And he was able to show us the statistics and how clean this Batavia water is, and it amazed me of how clean it was. So Anyway, that's what I.
Mayor, is that stormwater or your sewer system or what is it?
Sewer system, storm,
Everything.
everything.
Wow, that's impressive.
And then we has a huge, we have a plant there basically that takes that water and runs it all through, takes out all the solids and everything else. And then they run it through some water systems that clean it up. And then at the end, it goes into the Fox River, right at the south end of our sewer plant.
That's incredible. That's great.
So I just share that I like to think that we're helping to spread a new idea that 50 years from now, another group like this will be meeting about that and they'll be able to say, well, the water is pretty clean now because the federal government got into it and we've been able to kind of clean things up and get things back into a normal use. Because this water thing is, I don't think it's going away. You know, I was in a meeting in this room maybe last year and the US Weather Bureau came over and spoke to the Council of Mayors about what they're thinking. And what I gathered from it was they don't think that we're going to be in a drought around here. We're probably going to have a lot of rain and a lot of need for discharging water and storing water and whatever. In my town, I've got a lot of family farms west of town that are still being farmed, and it's a pretty good business for most of them, and many of them it's a multi-generational thing because they can go out and plant the corn and the beans and sell them on the market, and a lot of it goes right down to Peru, and they put it on the Illinois River and ship it down the Mississippi to goodness knows where it all gets sold, but they get good money for all that. So, but I mean, they're another one that says, well, we like to have the rain. That makes us going. So, you know, west of the north, west, and south of the Chicagoland area, there's thousands of farm fields that are prime Illinois farming properties that are generating a lot for the world to live off of. And so that's another blessing of this whole thing. So I'm really commending CMAP for what you're trying to do here to kind of wrap our arms around all the issues that surround the water supply and how it can be rearranged and remanaged and reused and what's good, what's bad, and how to do it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Were there other comments or questions for Kate? It sounds like, Kate, I think we'd like to see you back in July to talk about that weighting and maybe, see some examples of how some projects might score out. Is that what I'm gleaning from the committee here?
Yeah, I mean, at least from like the city standpoint, like green infrastructure makes complete sense. We have concerns with obviously the gray because it's cost prohibitive and to upsize it beyond what's required or even include it, a lot of times it's just cost prohibitive. So I think you get where I'm going, but
Yeah, and just to clarify, we're not recommending, we're not recommending one over the other. I think clearly this factor originated with the green infrastructure factor. We didn't want to lose that intent. And I think there are lots of benefits to going with green infrastructure added on to transportation projects because it is more cost effective, more adaptable. You can expand it in the future. So I'm not necessarily advocating for larger pipes by any means, but that could be one way to demonstrate exceeded capacity.
All right. Thank you so much, Kate. And
you.
thank you everyone for the comments. I think the next topic we have up is a continuation of the safety discussion we started at our last meeting. So I think Vicki's going to start us off and then introduce some of the staff to make the proposal.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me back. I'm Victoria Barrett. I'm the program lead for Safe Systems here at CMAP. At our last meeting, I presented the findings from our recent Safe Travel for All Safety Action Plan for the region, which includes new data tools that we wanted to put into action with our project scoring as soon as possible. And Allison will present our proposed recommendations to you here today on how we can better use these tools to identify need and improvement for projects in our region related to safety. You'll also see glimpses of the safe system approach and a systemic way of thinking being brought into the scoring criteria. And this is something that over the next months and about a year, the safety team is going to continue to develop some new ways of thinking about project impacts that are highly informed, not just by crash history, but by safety risks that we've been able to identify through extensive analysis. So we're really excited about the opportunity for the safe system approach to impact our region in a really positive way over the long term. Today will be our proposed methodology for this funding cycle. And I just want to give a shout out to Allison Dressman and Marielle Brown, our new safety team here who really dug into this work, and to Kama and Doug and John Hadsma for helping us understand this process and really holding us accountable for careful vetting. So thank you, and Allison.
Good morning, everyone. As Vicki said, my name is Allison Dressman. I'm a planner here at CMAP in our Safe Systems program, and today I am happy to speak with you about some of our early efforts to align CMAP programming with that safe system approach that Vicki noted, and this includes some small tweaks to the STP shared fund evaluation methods for this upcoming call for projects. So before we jump into the proposed methodology, I just want to very quickly revisit some of the items that Vicki walked us through last meeting. So we learned more about the Safe System approach, CMAP's FY23 Safe Streets for All Award that led to the creation of 6 county safety action plans. And main takeaways from those plans, including crash data findings, new data tools, recommended countermeasures, and then themes that we found across all the different plans. So here they are again. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at them at some point. They're very beautiful, but they're also great inside. Lots of good content. So at the last meeting, Vicki shared the county SAP results and how each county prioritized safety improvements. So one of the main tools that they used was the development of high injury networks, or HINs, or I'll call them HINs. And so I'm just showing this slide to reground us, all again to make sure we have a shared understanding of what the HINs represent. They identify the corridors where severe crashes happen most frequently over the last 5 years. So this is very much a reactive approach. It looks backwards at where the data tells us the biggest conflicts have happened most frequently. Because each county plan developed its HIN a little differently, they really tailored the approach to local context and local priorities. The methods of creating the HINs aren't exactly the same across the different plans. So this variation really means that the HINs kind of stand on their own in their respective counties, and that influences how we're able to use them within our scoring framework. So another tool that was developed through these SAPs was the county level systemic analyses. And this process adjusts the lens a little bit to crash data, and instead of looking at only where crashes have happened, they look at roadway features and context to identify common risk factors associated with severe crashes. So compared to the HINs, these highlight locations that have risk factors, even if they haven't experienced that severe crash in the same way that would have shown up on the HIN. And like the HIN work, each county plan tailored its systemic method based on those local priorities and roadway conditions and things like that. So again, there's a lot of variation across the methodologies here and how they can be used. As talked about in our last meeting, one of our goals in this program is to make sure that the work that CMAP is doing and the work of this committee is aligned with the county SAPs and with the broader regional safety framework that we are busy building out. Those plans included a lot of thoughtful local analysis. We want to make sure that we're carrying that forward in a meaningful and practical way. So today I'm going to walk through a set of proposed updates to the STP shared fund evaluation methodology. And the idea here is really to just better align with that safe system approach and really offer clear pathways for implementing the SAP recommendations. So this slide gives a quick preview of where we're headed during our time today. There's 2 major changes that I'm gonna, or not really major, they're very minor actually, minor changes that I'm going to be talking about. First, tweaking how we determine safety need for roadway projects, and then second, introducing a new way to evaluate improvements for projects that are only the projects that are categorized as safety projects. So I'll walk through each of these in detail. So just want to start by laying the foundation of how projects are currently scored before we get into those proposed adjustments. STP projects fall into several different categories, and the evaluation methods and the scoring values vary depending on the category for which the project is being scored. So the first proposed change that you'll hear about today tweaks the way safety need is determined for projects that are highlighted, project categories that are highlighted right here. Just 4 categories. So right now, projects in these 4 categories are evaluated for safety need, but the weight that safety carries varies by that category that they're being scored for. For example, corridor and small area safety projects can earn up to 20 points for safety need, while truck route improvement projects consider safety alongside other factors like truck geometric deficiencies and volume and reliability and condition and things like that. Even with those different weights, safety need is measured almost the same way across categories. The IDOT SRI score is the basis for determining that need, with higher SRI scores earning more points. And for most roadway projects, that SRI score is weighted and combined with the other need factors that you see on the slide. For corridor and small area safety projects, however, this SRI score is paired with crash history to produce that final need score. This method follows a conventional safety framework that relies largely on crash history to determine that need and misses the opportunity to reduce kinetic energy across our roadway, the force across our roadway system, and minimize that risk for all road users. While this framework is familiar to many, if not all of us, it's ultimately misaligned with our safe system approach that we're trying to implement. So the change that we're proposing today focuses specifically on how that safety need score is determined. All other metrics and weights will stay the same. The ones for condition, mobility, all of those stay the same. So then rather than relying on the IDOT SRI score, we are recommending that the safety need be based on 2 elements from those county SAPs: the county level high injury network and the systemic risk typologies identified through those systemic analyses. So under this approach, projects would earn points for safety need, and 25% of those points would be whether or not they're located on a county HIN. And then the other 75% would be based on the location having systemic risk factors identified in the relevant county SAP. This updated score would only apply to the safety portion of the existing condition and need metric. For example, roadway reconstruction projects, for those projects, safety would still carry that only 20% weight and then be combined with those other factors, just as it is today. So the safety need score would then be scaled to the maximum allowed for the project type, which is 20. The second change that we are proposing today is an adjustment to the way safety improvement is scored only for corridor and small area safety projects. We're not touching the improvement score for any of these other ones. So it's just the safety projects. And in the last round, I believe that was about 5 projects, if I have that right. So under the current method, the proposed corridor small area safety project's highest crash reduction factor, or CRF, is multiplied by the number of serious and fatal crashes at the project location. Then we find that relative to the overall project's cost, and we scale it to the other projects in the category, and that results in the improvement score. Like need, improvement also carries a 20-point maximum for this category. For projects in the corridor and small area safety category, we're proposing to use FHWA's safe system design hierarchy to determine the improvement score. Consistent with the current process, project sponsors will still identify which countermeasures their project includes. The assigned scores for those countermeasures will be added together compared to that overall project cost, and then scaled across all the projects in the category to produce an improvement score of up to 20 points. The overall improvement scoring process remains similar to before, but we'll use the design hierarchy for scoring countermeasures instead of relying on CRFs. By doing this, we shift away from the reliance on crash history and the CRFs, which often depend on really specific roadway conditions to be meaningful. Instead, the design hierarchy approach evaluates countermeasures based on their expected effect on the transportation system and their potential to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes. So this allows us to assess improvements proactively and in a way that better reflects safe system principles. Here's a look at that design hierarchy that I mentioned. We'll just go through each of these to kind of orient. So the first tier is removing severe conflicts. This could be things like roundabouts or physical separation. between different users. Tier 2 is countermeasures that reduce vehicle speeds. So that could be self-enforcing roadways, it could be road right sizing. Tier 3 is managing conflicts in time. This is often signal elements. Tier 4, increase attentiveness and awareness. So that could be signage, rumble strips, things like that, other striping. And so points for each countermeasure correspond to its potential to reduce serious injuries and fatalities. Projects that include treatments likely to increase risk on any of these tiers will receive negative points for those tiers, but the overall safety score for a project will never dip below 0. The final safety score in those cases would just be 0. So why the change? Well, this is the first step. This is a minor tweak. As part of our Safe System program here, we're gearing up to make further long-term changes. But for now, this adjustment offers a closer alignment with the Safe System approach. It also offers an opportunity to operationalize resources developed in the SAPs, which reflect that more complete local context and priorities. And it's really important for us to implement the work that we've invested a lot of energy and funding into, and a move toward getting to our 2050 goal of 0 traffic fatalities. So to wrap up my part, I just want to walk you through a couple of examples of how that scoring, the proposed scoring would look in action. First example that I want to share is a roadway reconstruction project. This is not a real project, but just for today's sake. In the project scope, it will reconstruct the roadway, add a turn lane, improving intersection geometry, and upgrade signals. So if you go to the next slide, currently the safety need would be 0 because it's on this low SRI score, low SRI tier, I should say. And then that's weighted and it's combined with all the other elements, and that's how we get to that scaled need score. But under the new methodology, if you go to the next slide, in this example, it wasn't on the county HIN, which kind of aligns with the fact that it was a low SRI tier, but then it would get points for systemic risk because at the location there were risk factors that were present, that were found to be meaningful in those SAPs, or one of the SAPs that for the county that it's in. And then it's also addressing those risk factors in some way. So we didn't want to be awarding points for the risk factors if they were not doing something for that. And then, so that's the first example, just to show you how that would work. And then the second example is for that improvement score for just the safety projects. And so this example project, Corridor Small Area Safety Project, it's a corridor that will construct pedestrian bump outs, install a bike lane, fix shoulders, improve lighting, and implement signal improvements. And since we just went over how current need and improved need would work, I'm just going to skip that part. But if we look at improvement, currently the max CRF for the project limits would, or for the project scope, would be multiplied by the number of KA crashes in the crash history that we have for that location, and then scaled to produce that final like 5 out of 20 that it, or the 13 and then the 5 after it's scaled. But under the new design hierarchy method, they would receive different scoring, and I'll show you on the next slide how that works. It would also still be scaled, but it would be a very similar process. So for example, right now, the CRF for each of these safety elements that they have are there, but also a number of them don't have CRFs. And that can be challenging, and it could be a missed opportunity for some of these more impactful safety measures, such as removing severe conflicts. So in the proposed methodology, I'll just jump down to the pedestrian bump outs. Those can offer safety benefits for tiers 1 and 2, removing severe conflict, and it can narrow the roadway, make it can be a speed, reduced speed, sorry. And so that would actually get points for tiers 1 and 2 because it's having these co-benefits that go beyond just one tier. So really this methodology is helping to realize all of the different elements of the project and the safety benefits, and then also helps us align with the safe system approach where we are really taking those prioritized, that list of prioritized elements and scoring as such. All right, so this is again my summary slide of what I talked about today. So we have the safety need only applying to 4 of the project categories and only partially for 3 of them. And then the safety improvement would only apply to the corridor small area safety category. And the next slide. So CMAP already has several ongoing and upcoming efforts also aimed at improving our programming, aligning more with the safe system approach. And I just wanted to note some up here that are coming up. So a few examples of that work. While broader changes are expected in the long term, these adjustments today are just intended to really help provide that smooth transition toward a more comprehensive safe systems-based evaluation framework in the future. So that's all I have today. I am happy to take questions.
Thank you, Allison. Are there questions about the proposed scoring changes? I think, similar to resilience, what's being proposed is kind of a tweaking to use the information that we have through the work that we've done. I do think, as Allison mentioned, this the thought of using these high injury networks and systemic values that were developed locally is a huge plus versus using statewide averages or national averages on the CRFs, the crash reduction factors. So, yeah, questions or thoughts for Allison? Everything sounds reasonable. We're good to go, or is there additional information?
It sounds reasonable to me. I think, especially looking at what's not just concentrating on the high risk where there were fatalities or major accidents, but where we can get safety improvements is important. I know it's not covered here, but in LaGrange, the village would like to put a light so pedestrians can cross LaGrange Road. We haven't had a fatality. It's mainly for students. Thank God, no student has died crossing LaGrange Road yet, but we don't want to wait. And so to us, it's a high risk area. It's something that would really show improvement. And so I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I think there's definitely potential, to take in more projects that are looking to make a safety improvement before something bad happens, instead of reacting to those bad things that do happen. So I think that'll give us more options for safety projects. So I think that's a good thing.
I think it's a good topic for CMAP to take on and to explore and make recommendations for. And I think that's what we've heard today is just another good example of the well-worthness of this organization.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tara?
Yeah, with regards to some of the scoring on there, it had like roundabouts and street lighting and so forth. Do all the councils include street lighting or all those elements in their methodology as federally eligible that the council pays for?
I am not sure on that.
Yeah, for the local.
Going way back, but I mean, I do recall that there were some differences between councils in terms of eligibility. So flagging for you that like roadway lighting, for instance, if that's not fully covered by local council, then it's more of a challenge to implement because lighting is very costly. And then second part, so first one was a comment, next one is a question. If you already have roadway lighting on your street and you're applying for it, do you get credit for it when you're scoring it?
My understanding is, and we have some things to work out for the final version of this proposal, but I think that it would be new elements that they're applying for that would be in the project or replaced, or is that kind of in line with how it was done in the past?
Sorry. Based on the tiering, which you're way more familiar with than I am, I would think that adding lighting would score higher than maintaining your lighting, and you might get into the negative aspect if you had lighting and took it out, right? To your question about eligibility in the council programs, it does vary by council. There's also, issues with IDOT and federal highway eligibility on street lighting. Again, I'm a little out of touch with what the current practice is, but I know in the past it's been, if there aren't a bunch of night crashes, then the lighting may not be eligible for federal funding. I'm not sure how tight or loose that is currently. But I think for the purposes of the shared fund, as long as the feds found it to be an eligible scope element on a particular project, I think this committee has always, favored paying for all eligible scope elements. So I think we would continue that practice. It's never been the intent of this committee on the large regional projects to limit scope. So as long as it was federally eligible, I think it would be included in the cost. And it's possible, and I know it's happened in the past where we've included funding for something like lighting or street, whatever, and, get through the NEPA process and into design and find out that it's not eligible. And then, the project sponsor has to make the decision about whether they're going to pay for it locally or take it out of the scope. So, and that will still occur. I mean, that it's not on CMAP or this committee or the councils to determine what's eligible. That's a final call made by the state and the feds. So, Other comments or questions, or it sounds like we're on the right track, and so we'll look for updates as part of the application booklet towards the fall. Thank you all. All right, thank you, Allison. Thank you, Vicky, as well. Next on our agenda is other business. Before I ask anyone else if there's any other business, I did just want to briefly thank Mark Pitstick for his service. He served as an alternate on this committee with Heather being the regular member, but Mark is retiring here shortly, and we congratulate him on that and thank him for pinch hitting at this committee from time to time, as well as his service on the CMAC and TAP committee for many, many, many years. And many other, yes, absolutely. UWP, transportation. Yeah, absolutely. So Mark, best of luck with your retirement and thank you for your service to the region, really. So is there any other business from anyone else on the committee? All right, seeing none, let's move on to public comment. There is no public comment in the room. Does anyone online wish to make a public comment? If so, use the raise hand function or just go ahead and unmute yourself. Going once, going twice. All right, let the record show that there were no requests for public comment today. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 16th, and I expect that we'll continue our discussion on resilience and probably pick up another couple of topics as well. So seeing no other business, do I have a motion to adjourn today?
So moved.
Mayor Schalke, Mayor Kukler. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. The meeting is now adjourned at 10:34 a.m. Thank you, everyone.